Hello everyone and welcome to Young with Ram, the series where I put up a video answering the questions you guys asked me in the previous one. Um, Before going into the questions and answers, there's one thing I want to kind of announce. This week until probably Saturday, even probably Sunday, I'm going to be extremely busy. I have some visits on my home, and I have to, well, the kind of thing that you get some people that you want to treat well at home, and I won't be able to record or to render or edit a lot, if something at all. That doesn't mean there are not going to be videos. This is actually being recorded on Saturday, not Monday. So it's going to be uploaded on Monday, and I have more stuff ready to upload and not to keep you guys, distracted as the week passes by. But I don't know if I'm going to be able to record anything or do anything during the week. So what you are going to see is all already in the can. Say that, well, it's time and it's the moment to start answering the questions I posted last week. First of all, is more related with the channel than with myself. But yeah, that's an interesting one because, well, goes hand to hand with what I just said. Any plans to do another plane analysis of whichever plane of your choice? I'm waiting for a new one. Well, the plane analysis, as you know, there's a one of the Tempest I posted up last week. The question, of course, was asked before I put the Tempest analysis. Yes, there are more plane analysis incoming. There's one in the can already. You are going to see probably tomorrow, if not Wednesday. We'll see. And I'm planning to do more, but probably the format is going to change somewhat for several reasons. First of all, because I have already covered a lot of planes and most of them will be revisits. Second of all, because the flight models are changing a lot with each patch, and I don't want to jump into a plane, do a review, and then see it change it, so it needs an in-flight model. And also because I want a little more interaction with you guys. So probably what I'm going to do is to create a series instead of this how I have been doing it until now, where you guys pick the plane I'm going to review next. Of course, within my limits, you are going to see. I'm going to put up the levels I am at, and I'll ask you guys to choose a plane within those levels, in those nations I have, and the most voted one will get reviewed in the next video. I'm planning to do a format of one video per week because I want to give people enough time to vote for the plane they want to see. Also, it's going to have some limits. I'm not going to review planes that are especially broken or are the flavor of the month. So if you ask for the Spitfire 9 right now, it's not going to happen. For instance, if you ask for the N1K, I don't have it unlocked, but it's not going to happen either because it's broken. So what I'm going to ask is for you guys to take a look at my levels and to pick a plane I can do a review on, which is not the flavor of the month plane and which is not clearly broken. And with those parameters, well, the plane analysis series will be reborn. And I hope you enjoy in its new shape and in the new way it's going to be. There's a question posted here, which is in Spanish actually, but I'm going to try to translate for you guys to understand it. It says, Ram, what do you think about this idea? North American planes start the battle at the same height as the bombers because historically their objective was to escort them and not intercepting Luftwaffe planes with some exception. Well, twofold. First, historical point of view. Second, gameplay point of view. Historical point of view. This is not true. In fact, the American escorts started to kill a lot of enemies and be much more successful when they were liberated from escorting the bombers. Actually, the American escorts acted in free fighter mode. they swept the skies ahead of the bombers. Of course, then there were some fighters which were dedicated to top escort, maybe 5-6,000 feet over the bomber formations, but the biggest number of American planes were dedicated to sweep ahead of the bomber formation. So they were actually in free hunt, in free fighter mode. That's also the reason why so many German planes were killed in airstrips and landing and taking off, because those planes which were in free fighter mode, if they detected no German fighter incoming, what they would do would be to go down to the ground and start attacking targets of opportunity. That's how the P-47 started getting a good renown and a good fame as a fighter bomber. Um, so historically, I don't think it's accurate. Of course, there was a time when that happened, when American fighters were chained to the bombers. But overall, I don't think it's all that historically accurate. Depends on the period you're talking about. Second of all, from the gameplay point of view, I think it's an astronomically wrong decision. Why? Because um, let's put it this way. Yes, American fighters were. You can argue that they were going to escort bombers. Well, you can do that in this game. You can actually climb out to a bomber position and start escorting it in 2 minutes from game start. The problem here is first that the bombers go dive to the ground targets, and they start attacking them at 1000 meters. And it's impossible to escort them that way, because to escort a bomber at 1000 meters you have to be at 3000 meter tops, and then you are open to attack for all the other team which is coming at 6000 meters. So first of all, it's because the bombers don't fly properly. Second of all, because it emplaces an instant advantage on the other side. On the American side, I mean. If you start spawning fighters at 3000 meters to go with bombers, those fighters are not going to stay to escort the bombers. They are going to climb a lot more and go in free fighter mode. If there was a way to guarantee that those fighters would stay and escort those bombers, then it might be a decent idea. But as they won't stay close to the bombers, because no one is interested in escorting bombers in historical battles, unless very few people who are team oriented, as most 90% of the people are going to totally ignore the bombers, and they are going to go for their own interest, and they are going to use and abuse that hate start advantage for their own abuse, that's not going to work. That's a mechanism that, if implemented, won't be good. Right now in the game, there are several maps that are really in a bad shape. One of them is New Guinea. Another one is Britain, the map where the Germans get an air start. And both are really hard for the other side, for the British. New Guinea, because all the Japanese land planes start in the air. And England, of course, because all the German planes start in the air. They are instantly at a huge disadvantage and lose most of those battles because of that. So no, I don't think it's a good idea. It would make for very unbalanced scenarios and would be abused by people. I repeat, if there was some mechanism, some way to force the fighters that spawn at an altitude to stay close to those bombers, might work, but as there is going to be no such mechanism, it's a terrible idea. That's my opinion, at least. Let's move on to next question. What do you think about the P-51 now after patch 1.33? Well, exactly the same that I thought about the P-51 in previous patches. It's an excellent fighter. It's a great boom and zoomer. It's very capable. It just doesn't climb very well, but the historical plane didn't either. And for a boom and zoomer, sustained climb rate really is not that big of an issue. Just forces you to climb out longer at the game start. But once the battle begins, if you have ensured the altitude you should ensure before entering combat, it's an excellent fighter. Yep, that's it. So next question. Oh, Ram, what on earth is compressibility? Thanks. I know it's a new question. No, it's actually not. Compressibility is what killed P-38 diving at high speeds, for instance. It's a phenomenon that happens when the air around the plane is accelerated to Mach 1, to the speed of sound. Um, if you think about a wing shape, you see that it's curved upwards and downwards. The air, as it comes to the wing, is accelerated towards the upper side and the lower side of the wing. It's accelerated because it's required to go around. And one of the principles of physics and the fluid physics is that if you force a fluid to do that, it's going to accelerate. Um, when that speed of the air started coming close to the speed of sound, compressibility started to happen. Compressibility is a term to, well, as the speed of sound, the air tends to accumulate itself. It tends to increase density and to form shock waves. When those shock waves started inciding and falling on control surfaces, for instance, the tailplane, those control surfaces will go totally far. I mean, then they would the pilot would lose the use of those control surfaces. That's not currently in the game, and that's not the complete explanation, by the way. That's a very simple approach. There's a lot more into compressibility than that, but I'm trying to make it simple. When it's in the game, when it's implemented, when compressibility makes its way into War Thunder, I'll make a Combat Flight School explaining it in detail. Um, Compressibility is not currently into the game, and compressibility was actually the reason why many planes couldn't go at a given speed in a dive and no more. As compressibility is not in the game, is not affecting planes as they should, and some planes as a result are diving much better than what they could, and maneuver much better at high speeds than what they should. A good instance is the PF-109, a plane that at very high speeds tended to lose quite a bit of roll rate and a little bit of elevator authority, for instance. When it happens, when compressibility comes into War Thunder, I will do a combat fighter school about that, explaining how it works and which planes are most affected by it. So yeah, and it's not a question, by the way. It's a really complicated one. I mean, Kelly Johnson, which is one of the big names in plane designs from an historical point of view, the guy who designed the P-38, the F-104, the Starfighter, the guy who was behind the U-2, the SR-71, he designed the Lightning, the P-38, and the P-38 was probably the World War II plane which was most susceptible to be destroyed by compressibility. So believe me, it's not enough question, not at all. Next question. What do you think about Cayenne adding some of the later models of the P-47 and the P-51, such as the P-47N and the P-51H? Do you think they will be forever or make the game way too imbalanced? I'm all for it. In fact, I'm hoping that it happens soon. What I think is that a lot of people are going to be disappointed, and they are going to start starting all the way, all again with the Gallin is biased against the Americans. Because if you are expecting the P-47 and the P-51 to be very different from the current P-47 and P-51, think again. Yes, they were faster. But okay, the P-47 first was faster. Second, had a bigger wing. Third, was much heavier, much heavier. Had a much bigger range. The P-47N was a long-range version of the standard P-47. Was a heavily modified one, but still was heavy, didn't turn at all, and didn't climb well. So if you don't like the P-47, you're not going to like the P-47N. There's no way around that. There's another version of the P-47, the P-47M, which had a super up engine, and that one was kind of decent at climbing and accelerating. Decent, not good, decent. But still, the plane is good for what it is. you are never going to expect a P-47 to climb well or to accelerate well. They are going to be fast, they are going to dive well, they are going to zoom well, but they are never going to turn well, they are never going to sustain climb well, they are never going to accelerate well. Not even the end. Even more so, the end is, was heavier and had the same engine that the later D versions. So it actually was worse at some parts of the claim rate envelope. So yeah, I think that one will surprise people for the worst. The P51H, well, that one probably will have 150 octane fuel. It's going to be very, very, very fast. But the problem is that the P51H was renowned because it had a very weak structure. It actually was in service in the era of the Korean War, but it was never fielded there because the U.S. Air Force deemed it as too weak to go into war. The B-51, if you think about it, was a basic design that remained mostly unchanged in structural terms from the Allison version, the very early versions, which weighed around 4 tons at takeoff weight, and moved on to the later B and D versions with Merlin engines and much heavier. The latest P51Ds were weighing around 5 tons, which is around 1 ton heavier than the very early P51s. That extra weight wasn't accounted for within the structure. They didn't reinforce it. And as a result, the P51D had kind of a reputation to have suspect wing structure and to have some troubles with it. It was not a big issue. The plane was fantastic and it was not a huge issue. But still, there were some concerns about that. The P51H was exactly the same as a P51D, but what they did was to take the structure and enlighten it as much as they could. They didn't change for a lighter engine, they didn't change for lighter weapons, they didn't remove vital equipment. What they did was take the structure and try to enlighten it as much as possible. If you take a structure that is not really that strong and you take weight out from it, what you are doing is weakening it. The P51D was a plane with a suspect wing structure. The P51H was a plane with wing weakness. So it's a plane that is going to be setting wings in dives all day long if you are not extremely, extremely, extremely careful. For sure, it's going to climb much better than the P51 we have. It's going to accelerate much better. It's going to be faster. But to be honest, the Mustang is all about dive and zooms. It's all about boom and zooms. If you take away the ability to dive at very high speeds because you are fearing you are losing your wings, you are taking away most of what made that plane great. In my opinion, the P51H wasn't a good plane, a good fighter. And it's not my opinion. If it was that great of a fighter, it would have been sent to Korea. It never was. The P51 that fought over Korea was the B, never the H. It was the H was retired after a very nothing career in the U.S. Air Force. If you try to go to historical archives and see for the P51H history, they did nothing. They were just there in the States doing absolutely nothing. They weren't fielded in the fronts because they suspected the structure was not good enough to stand the high speed fights the plane was supposed to have. So I don't think they are going to unbalance the game at all. The P47N I think is going to be an extremely, extremely good boom and summer, given its bigger weight. But I think they are going to be a letdown for many people because they are going to expect the Terminator fighter, and they weren't Terminator fighters. They were very good, the P51, P47N, and I don't think it was that good, the P51H. But I'm, of course, all for them to be in the game because they existed in history and they have a place in the game. So, yeah, next question. What do you think about Daft Punk? I like it. I like it a lot. In fact, one of the things that brings me the most into Circumflex's stream to see it. By the way, I have been there a lot of times, just not talking a lot because I have been busy doing other stuff. But one of the things is that he usually puts that Daft Punk in his stream. Uh, but the thing is, I like it so for just background music. It's not something that I go and I'm a huge fan of. I like it, but just to listen it casually. Not not really into it. But yeah, it's a music I like a lot. More questions. And one more about music. Ram, do you listen to rap? Actually, some. Some. I don't like hip hop as a whole. I like some of it. Favorite hip hop or rap singer? Eminem, by far. I mean, he's also the most commercial. Maybe it's that as well. I don't know. But since his very beginnings, Eminem is a guy I really like it a lot. I also like his non-political correctness. I'm a very hugely political uncorrectness guy. I think that political correctness is one of the worst things of the modern world. Um, I mean, you can even make a joke and without being looked bad at. But yeah, whatever. The thing is that Eminem is such against political correctness that I have to admire him in that way. And I like his music. I like his music a lot. Really, it's that's the most one I liked back in the 90s. I liked Tupac. But back then my English wasn't good enough to understand it. I mean, if I listen to a new Eminem song, I might understand 40% of it, no more than that. I mean, the accent, the slang, the how fast he pronounces, it's hard for me to follow up, and Tupac was utterly impossible to understand. But I liked the rhymes. I mean, I liked how it sounded. I didn't understand crap of what he was singing, but I liked him. So yes, I'm into it. Not a lot, again, but yeah, now and then I liked it. Yeah, yeah, I do. Interesting one incoming. Ram, in your opinion, what was the turning point in the war in Europe? Stalingrad, Battle of Britain, Battle of the Bulls, 1944, American bomber raids. It's actually hard to answer this question because there were several turning points. I mean, there were several points where Germany, had it pushed the way that it was pushing, would have won the war. One of them was 1941, the decision to attack the Soviet Union before getting Great Britain out of the war. Great Britain was alone, and probably sooner or later would have been forced to come into terms. With all the Luftwaffe concentrated in France, with all the German manufacturing and industrial might pushing for a victory against Britain, increasing the number of submarines, increasing the importance of naval aviation, probably Britain would have been able forced to submit maybe in 1942, 1943. It wasn't close, to be honest. In March 1943, the convoy system in the Atlantic was nearly collapsing. It was, I think, 2 months, like March 1943, and the Allies would have renounced to the convoy system, and that would have been a like saying that Britain was out of the war. Maybe not surrender, but wouldn't be able to be used as a base to launch offensive operations as the invasion of the continent. It was bloody close to that, and that happened when the United States was already into the war. So without the United States in the war, and with all the industrial might of the Germans supporting the Luftwaffe in a bombing campaign over Britain, sorry, and with increased submarine production, probably Britain would have been forced to ask for conditions in 1942, 1943. That's one. The second one, and the biggest one, and the one that really decided the war, in my opinion, um, 12. I think it was the 12th of December 1941. German declaration of war on the United States. That was the biggest, hugest, absolute, idiotic decision Hitler ever took in the war. Bringing the United States officially into the war versus Germany when he had in his hand the possibility of getting rid of them. I mean, just picture that. Pearl Harbor had happened just 5 days before. The Americans were totally outraged against the Japanese. If at that point Hitler comes up and says that he totally condemns what the Japanese have done, that they expelled them from the Tripartite Pact, and that offers his condolences and support to the American people, back then in 1941 there was a very strong pro-German lobby in the United States. Well, with those wars, with those actions, Roosevelt would have never been able to declare war on Germany itself. At least not in the short term, because he had a war to fight in the Pacific, and a war he was losing until Midway. So the public opinion, the public American opinion, would have been really against a war with Germany had Germany not declared war against the United States. And the pro-German lobby in the States probably would have forced Roosevelt to stay clear from supporting the Allies, because he had now a war to wage in the Far East. Bringing the United States into the war meant landless convoys to Murmansk, to the USSR. 1942 probably the Soviet Union survived because of American support. If you look at all the things that they received, radio sets, trucks, locomotives, mostly trucks. I mean, in 1943, around 70% of the truck fleet of the Soviet Union was of Western origin. In 3 years, the West sent more than 900,000 trucks to the Soviet Union. Not to mention tanks, planes, fuel, ammunition, spare parts, radio sets, because the Soviets, 3 out of 4 radio sets in the Soviet Union in 1942 were of Western origin and received from Murmansk or Persia. I highly doubt the Soviet Union would have been able to survive a 1942 offensive like the German one in the southern Russia, or at least would have been never been able to counter-strike the way they did at Stalingrad without Western support. And that support came because of the German declaration of war on the United States. The war in the Atlantic, huge impact, because now the Germans have to deal with twice the escorts and twice the air coverage. And now the United States were officially into the war. Before that, actually, there were some cases because the destroyers, the American destroyers, were allowed to fire on sight on the German U-boats. But from then it was official. All the industrial might of the United States was concentrated on Germany, because Roosevelt had a policy of Germany first. Even while he had a war in the East, he was losing it until Midway and Guadalcanal, Roosevelt and Churchill had agreed that Hitler was the biggest threat. And most of the American production and most of the American influx and they put a very high priority in killing Germany first. And had the US not been in the war, that would have never happened. I'm not saying that the United States won the war for the Allies. What I'm saying is that all 3 powers, the United States, the UK, and the USSR, beat Germany together. Had one of them been out of the picture, the war probably would have been lost. Without Britain, Germany would have been able to concentrate on the Soviet Union, and we know how close they were to beat it. Without the Soviet Union, Germany would have been able to concentrate all their power in the West and all the Wehrmacht in France. And good luck trying to disembark against all the German army. Without the United States, all that industrial might, all those strategically important points to cover the Atlantic against the submarine threat, would never have been there. And probably the USSR would have collapsed without that at a very critical point, which was 1942, 1943. Without the United Kingdom, Well, as I said, all the work back in the east. So it took all three powers combined to bring Germany down. And without any of them, the war probably would have been never won the way it was. Maybe it would have took much longer, but the way it did, it would have never happened. World War II in Europe was won by three powers, not one of them. All I'm saying is that the United States came into play at the probably most important point of the war, because in 1942 Germany could win the war, was well within grasp, but with the United States into the picture, no longer. It was impossible. So yeah, I think that was the turning point. The point where, with a single stroke, Hitler ensured that he would never win the war by declaring war on the United States. That's for me the point where the turning point. Yeah. In case you're wondering, yes, what you are seeing is me kicking butt in reserves in arcade mode. Yesterday I let myself go and joined the arcade and with Russian reserves, just for a little bit of fun. Yeah. So yeah. Next question. Ultimate question, Ram. BMW M3 versus GT 500 Mustang. Which one and why? For the looks, the Mustang. I There's something with the American car and the aesthetics. I love American cars and how they look, and the Mustang is beautiful. Oh shit, it's an amazing car. As a car, give me an M3. I'm not into the muscle car thing. I think that if you have a lot of power, you really want to harness it, and the muscle cars don't. I mean, a GT 500 Mustang with all that engine power and the suspension it has, really? It's a recipe for disaster. I mean, I love Corvettes, I love Mustangs, I love Camaros, I love the classic muscle cars of the 70s. I love them all, but I wouldn't own one. Really, I wouldn't. Well, maybe for the pleasure of having one or looking at one, but I'm not into that. I mean, if you have power, but have something to control it, some kind of driving assists in place to harness that power and not to let the car go totally away. I'm not a huge car fan anyway. I'm guessing that if you are a huge motorhead, muscle cars are it, because it's raw power without any kind of control other than the driver. But I don't think that. If I have power, I want to control it and harness it. So yeah, it's the BMW for me. Actually, it's not the BMW. I like Jaguars more than the BMWs. And from Germans, I like Porsche more than the BMW. But yeah, if I have to pick between those two, the M3, yeah. There are a lot of comments about me and Cosmos and what I said in my previous round with Jan video. There's one here, one comment that's asking me if I have seen a series called The Ascent of Man. Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, and I've seen From Earth to Moon. I've seen all that kind of stuff because I love it. I love space. I love space travel. I love space physics. Well, you know that I play Kerbal flight space program. So yeah, I have seen all of those. And probably one of the most and best documentaries I have ever seen, and I highly recommend you to see, is Failure is Not an Option. With this currently on YouTube, if you make a search for that, Failure is Not an Option, you will find the documentary. It's a pretty long documentary which covers most of the space race from the US perspective, from the very early beginnings up to the Apollo missions, and has some very important figures interviewed there, as Gene Kranz, which was the Apollo 11 and the Apollo 13 flight director, and a lot of people who were there. There's also a very short interview with the guy who was the protagonist of the famous SC2 Ox story, Yeah, I've seen the demo, and if you want to see something very cool and very historical, what's that one? Is as far as making a search in YouTube. I love that stuff. I simply love discovery. I love space exploration. I'm into that a lot, and I've seen everything you can imagine of that. So yeah, next question. Well, more than a question, that's actually another comment. There's one comment which is saying that Cosmos 2 is in the making and that they are going to bring it up again to life. And that's going to feature Neil deGrasse Tyson. I don't think that's a guy to do Cosmos 2. I know him. I have seen a lot of his videos. He's a very funny guy. But I think he's way too emphatic. He's way too really at moments in some of his videos one would wonder if he's a stand-up comedian or an actual physicist. He's that way. It's not that I don't admire him. I do admire him, but I don't think he's the proper style for Cosmos. For Cosmos second part, actualized to today's data, and as really nominates something to render tribute to Sagan. I think a guy as close to Carl Sagan himself would be required, and I think the best guy to do that is an Englishman. He's an English doctor, which is pretty young still. He's probably the same age Sagan was when Cosmos was released for the first time. His name is Dr. Brian Cox, and hosts. I don't know if they are still going on, but at least hosted a spectacular science program in BBC called, among others, The Wonders of Life. And he's much more similar to Sagan in his way of. I mean, he's collected, he's pretty charming. Of course, he's very smart, and he's a very good communicator. And I think that's the profile for Cosmos. I think that in order for Neil deGrasse Tyson, which is a great astrophysicist, to do Cosmos, he will have to play a role, not be himself. He's totally different from Sagan. Uh, and Brian Cox would be himself, not playing a role. I think that's very important in a program about physics and science in television for the general public. You have to be genuine. You have to be as close as yourself as you can be. If you are playing a role, I don't know. I don't really know. Still, I really want to see Cosmos 2. Let's see what they do, how they do. It's a really it's a disgrace that Sagan was gone so early. He was 62 when he died, and he could have been there here still had he survived. But yeah, well, this is one of those laws of nature that say that the best guys go down first. But yeah. Yeah, let's move on to the latest question and yeah, wrap it up for this Young with Ram episode. Um, a question that has always bothered me. Why do fighter planes go point forwards? If they pointed 15 degrees up, you could fire sooner in turn fights. You could fire on target while still flying light pursuit, and you will be flying in the cockpit. You can still see your target when you shoot, unlike in most fighters that have an engine blocking your forward down view. Only disadvantage is for head-to-head and ground attack, where guns that point down a bit would be better. Any thoughts? Well, what you described was actually done. It was called Schrade's music in German night fighters. Guns that were pointed 70 degrees into the vertical and which were used in night fighters to put the fighter below the bomber and to fire upwards. As for the why were never pointed 15 degrees, well, there's a host of reasons for that. First of all, when the recoil acts on a plane, it's much simpler for the plane to counteract it and not to lose control if the recoil is pointing directly backwards to add to the drag, because the plane is ready to take a is drag, is ready to take forces that go against them. If you are putting a gun pointing 15 degrees upwards, you are adding a component of recoil in the vertical, and the plane will also try to go down, so it's going to be a mess. Also, remember that the configuration for guns in fighters was reached in World War One, in the Great War. Back then, planes were little else than some canvas and stripped together with some wood and a little bit of wire, and that was all. It was an engine, some wood, some canvas, a little bit of wire to strip it together, and let's go. Those The only place to put guns in those things were fixed were over the engine, because it was the only place that would take the recoil, and of course you couldn't point them upwards. It's interesting because one of the Newports, I think the Newport 11, had one machine gun mounted in the cowling and another one over the wing, and the pilot could actually swivel the top machine gun on the wing, but it was very complicated. Also, back then, machine guns were highly unreliable, even more so when some Gs were being pulled, and they were very usually jammed, and the pilot had to actually unjam them manually from the cockpit. He who have to raise up, try to unjam the weapons. If you place them somewhere else, tilted up, no, the pilot can't unjam them. Also, it's intuitive. I mean, it's much easier to point the guns where the plane is heading, because it's much easier to aim that way. If you are aiming them at a different angle, it's much more difficult to compensate for that, because it's much more intuitive to know that wherever your plane is going towards is pointing its guns towards. And also, finally, is that last thing is the most important one. It's much more intuitive. It's much easier to aim with your guns point forward at an angle. It's as easy as that. Also, reflex sights are much easier to set for forward position. Even today, I mean, the guns today are pointing forwards just because of that. And finally, remember, you are not always going to shoot down enemies that are in a lag turn, or that you are lag turning to follow them. A lot of air kills were achieved by snapshots, which was pre-aiming the plane far before the enemy plane was actually in the point where the guns had to fire. And just aim there, wait for the enemy to go past there, and then open fire. That would be almost impossible without guns pointing directly forwards. These are some of the reasons, they are not all, but most of them are the ones I mentioned. So yeah, that's it for today's video. That's it for this episode of Young with Ram. As always, remember to put up your questions in the comment section below, to upvote those that you want to see commented on most, and well, I hope you had fun. I hope you enjoyed. Remember that this week what you are going to see is mostly canned and already recorded. Sorry for that, but I'm going to have a very busy week. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and see you later.